Welcome to Eerie Echoes. The Appalachian Mountains hold more than trails and cabins. They hold stories. Stories of voices whispering outside tents, strangers walking circles around lonely cars, and cabins where someone may already be watching from the dark. If you enjoy true horror told the way it really feels, the best way to support us is to subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it makes sure you never miss the next nightmarish tale waiting just beyond the trees. Tonight, 4 of those stories are yours to hear. The first night at the cabin, I woke to the sound of the front door creaking open. I had locked it. I remembered turning the deadbolt myself. It was the last weekend of October, 3 years ago, when I left the city with my cousin Dylan and my oldest friend Marco. The 3 of us had grown up together, but adulthood had scattered us into long shifts, bills, and tired commutes. We wanted a break, a real one. Somewhere without traffic, deadlines, or screens lighting up our pockets. Dylan found the listing. Shadow Lake Cabin, secluded, private, rustic charm. The photos showed a weathered wood cabin on the edge of a still lake, surrounded by pines so tall the sky looked like a narrow strip of gray above them. No neighbors for miles, the description promised. That was all we needed to hear. We left before dawn. Dylan driving, Marco riding shotgun, me in the back seat with a cooler wedged beside me. At first, the radio kept us company, but as the mountains grew taller, the signal dissolved into static. Our phones clung to the last bars of service before giving up entirely. The farther we drove, the quieter we became, like the weight of the forest pressed against the glass. By the time we turned off the main road onto a gravel track, dusk had already started dripping into the sky. The track twisted deeper, trees crowding in, headlights bouncing off trunks slick with old rain. Finally, the road widened, and there it was, the cabin. It wasn't large, just a square shape of dark logs with a small porch facing the water. The lake itself looked black, like a sheet of glass laid flat on the earth. The last slice of sun glinted across its surface, then disappeared behind the ridges. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. The floors creaked under our boots. A stone fireplace sat against one wall, mismatched chairs scattered around it. It wasn't polished or modern, but that was fine. We hadn't come for luxury. We came for silence. That first evening, we built a fire in the pit outside, grilled hot dogs and cheap steaks, and passed a bottle of whiskey between us. The flames crackled, sparks rising into the cold October air. We laughed louder than we had in months, maybe years. For a while, the forest seemed like a backdrop, just endless trees and dark water listening quietly to our stories. By midnight, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. Marco staggered inside first, mumbling about needing his bed. Dylan followed soon after. I lingered for a few minutes, staring at the lake. The reflection of the moon wavered in the black surface, rippling as though something had stirred beneath. I told myself it was only the breeze. When I finally went inside, I checked the front door, pulled it shut, turned the deadbolt, pulled again to be sure. Only then did I crawl into bed, the chill sinking into the blankets. I don't know what time it was when I woke. Sometime past 3, maybe later. The cabin was silent, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Then I heard it. The slow whine of the front hinges, the door, opening. My body locked tight. For a second, I told myself I must be dreaming. But then the floorboards groaned, soft, deliberate. Across the small room, Dylan shifted on his bed. His eyes opened, wide and alert. He had heard it too. We stayed frozen, listening. One step, then another, then silence. "Marco?" I whispered, my throat dry. No reply. I slid my legs out of bed and reached for the flashlight on the nightstand. The beam sliced the dark, catching only the log walls. Dylan's hand gripped the fireplace poker he had pulled from beside the hearth. We crept toward the living room. The front door stood ajar, an inch of night air leaking in. The deadbolt hung loose. "You locked it," Dylan hissed. "I did," I whispered back. My hand shook as I pushed the door shut and turned the lock again. We searched the cabin, every corner, every shadow. Nothing. No one. When we checked Marco's room, he was face down on the bed, shoes still on, snoring softly. He swore later he hadn't moved all night. The rest of the night passed in a blur of fear. We sat by the fireplace until the first gray light seeped through the windows, whispering theories we didn't believe. None of us really slept. Morning brought no comfort. When we opened the door, muddy footprints stretched across the porch. They started at the steps, crossed to the front door, then stopped. No trail leading away. Just heavy, human-shaped impressions pressed into the wood as if whoever made them had stood there for a long time. I remember crouching down, staring at the prints. They weren't ours. Too large, too heavy. I looked out into the trees, but the forest only stared back. We tried to bury the unease. That evening we grilled again, poured more whiskey, laughed too loudly. For a while the firelight pushed back the shadows. But when Marco glanced through the window, his laughter died. A flashlight beam flickered between the trees. Moving side to side, searching, Dylan shouted, "Hey! Who's out there?" The beam froze, then snapped off. The forest swallowed everything. We locked the door, wedged the chair under the handle, and sat by the fire. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy. Every flicker of shadow looked like movement. I sat clutching the poker until dawn. The next morning, we found something worse. Pressed against the window beside the front door was a muddy handprint. Large, wide fingers splayed across the glass. Fresh. None of us spoke. My skin prickled cold as though the hand was still there, pressed just on the other side. Then Dylan bent down. A scrap of paper was tucked beneath the door frame. He picked it up with trembling fingers. In neat handwriting it said, "You lock the door now. Shame." That was it. We didn't finish packing. We shoved clothes into bags, left dishes in the sink, food on the counter. Marco barely had his shoes tied when we pulled out of the gravel lot. We didn't breathe until the trees thinned and the highway appeared. It's been 3 years. I live in the city now, and every night before bed I check my locks. Once, twice, sometimes 3 times. But even when the deadbolt clicks into place, I still hear it. That slow, careful creak of hinges in the middle of the night. Some cabins are meant for rest, for laughter, for a quiet weekend away. Others remind you that sometimes the forest doesn't just surround you, it watches you. But cabins aren't the only places the Appalachians claim people. On the trails, even under a bright sun, the silence has a way of swallowing more than footsteps. There were 2 names in the trail register when we signed in that Friday morning, mine and my brother's. By Sunday afternoon, search and rescue copied only 1 name into their report. We chose Ravens. Peak because it looked modest on the map, 8 miles. Out and back with a lake near the saddle and a few established sites tucked under red spruce. It had the kind of photographs that make you think a weekend away might stitch something back together. My brother Aaron needed that more than anyone. He'd come off a bad winter, hours cut at work, a breakup he didn't talk about. But he still had that reflexive half smile every time a ridge opened up. I thought 2 nights in the mountains would help. That was my mistake, assuming the quiet would give us back what noise had taken. We left the city before sunrise in my old Ford, the cooler icing down from a gas station bag and the dashboard glowing a tired green. By the time we crossed the 2nd county line, the radio had surrendered to static and our phones were dead rectangles with cameras. The last stretch ran along a narrow road that stitched itself into the hills. There was a trailhead sign, brown paint, bullet dimples, the white raven emblem flaking at the edges. A sheet of plexiglass covered the logbook. Inside, under a pencil on a string, the last entry was dated 5 days earlier. 2 to Ridge Spur, back by dark, no return time scribbled next to it. That happens more than people think. I wrote N Hail plus A Hail, 2 nights, Raven Saddle, Blue Tarn. Aaron added a smiley face, which made me roll my eyes and also loosen something in my chest. The air had that mountain smell, damp, resin, an iron thread of rock. Ravens traded calls somewhere far up the slope, their voices dropping like stones. The first 3 miles climbed in switchbacks through mixed oak and laurel, then thinned into spruce and fir where the temperature fell 10 degrees and the light turned to green glass. Underfoot, the soil went soft and sprung, the trail braided with old logging grades and runoff channels. Blazes were good until they weren't. Twice we backtracked to find a turn we'd walked past. Each time we laughed, easier than we had in months. A band of clouds hovered stubbornly over the ridge, but the forecast called it stable. Had I known how quickly that word can lie in the mountains, I would have turned around at the first smudge of fog. We reached Blue Tarn near 4 in the afternoon, a small bowl of dark water ringed by sedge, the far bank crowded with fir. The saddle above it split toward the western lookouts, but we pitched lower in a sheltered hollow out of the wind. We did things by the book. Hung the food, filtered water, stacked kindling, set the stove on a flat rock. The simple work made our talk simple too. We didn't mention his ex, his job, the way he'd started rubbing the base of his thumb when he was thinking too hard. We talked about how the clouds moved, and how the spruce smelled like Christmas if you pressed your nose to the bark. By dark, fog licked in, the kind that arrives as if the ridge exhaled. I've never liked fog in the woods. It bundles the night and throws it at you. We ate noodles, burned the first round a little, and called it camp flavor. When the wind eased, the tarn went glass still, and our headlamps cut cones of white into it that ended too short. We turned them off to save batteries. That was when I heard it, the first time, faint enough to mistake for the wind dragging through the spruce tops. It sounded like a low chorus somewhere across the saddle. Not words. Not music either. A texture. If you've ever stood beneath heavy power lines, you know the sound I mean. The hum pressed down into a breath. I lay there inside nylon, counting off possible explanations. Wind. A distant road I hadn't noticed. Maybe water working through rock. The longer I listened, the less those answers fit. The hum had a pulse. And sometimes, once, twice, I thought I heard a voice swim up out of it and slip back under. Aaron was snoring. I told myself that was the only reason my chest had tightened. I turned on my side, buried my ear in the fleece, and finally let sleep lap in. The second day was clear enough to make a liar out of the night. We hiked with day packs to the western spur to a place locals call Raven's Elbow, where the ridge hooks and the valley falls away in a vertical cut of columnar basalt. We ate jerky and watched a hawk work thermals. Aaron grinned at nothing. I caught him tucking a small flat stone into his pocket and didn't ask. He'd been pocketing small, meaningless objects since he was a kid. To him, nothing small was meaningless. We got back to camp by mid-afternoon. The fog returned early. The hum came with it. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. I could tell he heard it by the way he paused while unspooling the bear line, the way his head tilted slightly, like he was locating a radio through a wall. Just after midnight, the hum sharpened into something like voices. We both sat up at once. The tent felt smaller than it had ever felt. My headlamp lit the condensation in a swarm. "Do you hear?" I started. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah." It was closer now, somewhere past the tarn, up toward the saddle. The words weren't words, but there was cadence and shape, like a conversation recorded through a wall. I unzipped the fly a hand width, turned my light off, and listened. I don't know how long enough that the bones behind my ears began to ache. "It's people," Aaron whispered. "Has to be. Late to be up there. Must be the lookout trail. We should check it," he said. But his voice held at the edge of the suggestion. "Careful. We wait till morning." He settled back, though I could feel him awake beside me. The way you can feel lightning along your skin before you see it. Sometime later, the voices thinned into wind. Sometime later than that, sleep took us. At 3:17 a.m., a scream tore through the trees. I know the time because my headlamp lay face down in the tent, and the button was easy to hit, and the numbers burned into my sight when I flipped it. The scream did the same, a single torn open sound from up toward the saddle, too raw to be anything but human. I think I said his name. I know he already had his boots on. Don't! I hissed. My throat knotted. Someone's hurt, he said. It wasn't bravado. It was reflex. We were raised to go toward pain. He took the whistle on the sternum strap and the knife I'd given him the previous Christmas. He didn't take the bear spray. I don't know why that detail matters, but it does. I blow 3 if I need you, he said, and slipped out, his headlamp lancing through spruce. The forest swallowed that thin cone. The hum resumed, or maybe I made it resume, because once you've heard a sound like that, you hear it in all the places silence should be. I waited. I counted to 60 and backed down. I told myself to put boots on, to stand up. I told myself to let the instinct that made him stand up go through me too. I told myself a lot of things and did none of them. The tent feels like armor until the person you love walks out of it. Then it feels like a trap. I heard his steps for a while, then nothing. Then the woods went so still my ears rang. After a long time, minutes or an hour, I don't know, the whistle blew. 1 sharp note, then 2. Then nothing, not 3. Not anything. I don't remember zipping the tent. I don't remember deciding. I was standing with the headlamp on my forehead and the spray in my hand and my boots badly tied before I knew I'd moved. My beam stitched through fog and caught the scuffed places where his soles had slid. The trail up to the saddle is steep, then steep again. Every few yards I stopped and listened. The only thing that answered me was my own breath. At the saddle, the wind pushed low cloud through like wet smoke. I swept the beam across rock and saw the tarned surface shiver under it. On the far side, a notch fell toward the western spur into a tangle of spruce so tight the light died inside it. Aaron, I said, and the fog ate his name. I blew the whistle. 3 blasts. The first echoed off something I couldn't see. The second sounded smaller. The third sounded like it didn't leave my mouth. I don't know how long I searched. I found nothing. No dropped knife, no hat, no sign of a fight. But the hum was there, denser in the notch, a skinned knuckle sound against the trees, and inside it, shapes of words that wouldn't turn into language. When gray finally bled into the sky, I ran. Back to the tent, back to the register. I didn't think about the way my hands shook when I dialed on a phone that had no bars and then did anyway when the road gave me one. I said the words all at once. Brother, scream, saddle, Raven's Peak. The dispatcher made me say them again, slowly, as if language might keep something from falling through. 2 deputies and a ranger arrived by 9 with a dog that had a name like a word you don't want to forget. Volunteers came with orange hats and quiet eyes. They made a plan because that is what you do against the places where plans don't matter. We searched until dark. We searched the next day. We searched with line and flagging tape, with maps and GPS, with the dog weaving through fur like a rumor. Near the notch, the dog sat down and cried like grief had a scent. The report is neat, measured, full of the right phrases. Sounded like a person in distress. Area searched gridwise. No sign found. Weather event hampered aerial. It says my brother is missing. It does not say that there is a sound in the notch that makes a metronome of your bones. It does not say that I have heard it since in the hum of my refrigerator, in distant traffic, under the lid of night. I gave statements. I slept at home without sleeping. I took calls from people who said the right things. I learned the kindnesses of strangers and the limits of them too. A month later, I went back alone. A ranger met me at the trailhead and waited there while I walked to the saddle with a stone in my pocket. The fog came early that day as if it had been waiting. At the notch, I stacked 3 flat stones on a stump. It felt childish. It felt like the only thing I could do. On the walk out, ravens followed me along the ridge, trading calls, counting something I couldn't. Every October since I have returned. The trail register has filled and emptied with other names and other neat loops of pencil. I write ours again anyway. At Blue Tarn, I sit and listen until the hum arrives, and I hate myself because it is the only thing that proves the place remembers. People have told me to stop going. People who love me. People who want what's best. They don't say the thing that is also true. that leaving won't bring him back, and staying might be the only honest way to live with what happened. I say his name into the notch. I wait for 3 blasts of a whistle I never hear. The official case file says missing. My life says something else, something without a word that fits. Some losses fall through language and keep going. Trails are supposed to take you somewhere, to a view, a lake, a saddle where the wind tastes like iron and resin. Raven's Peak taught me that some trails end in a sound you can't put down. If this story finds you, take it as the only warning I have. The mountains keep what they want, and the quiet here is not empty. Some say the high points are safer. Open sky, ranger maps, a clean line of sight to help if anything goes wrong. But at the old lookout on Pine Ridge, the danger wasn't what I could see. It was the voice I heard just beyond the light, saying my name like it knew me. The first time I heard it, the voice sounded like it was right behind me. But when I turned, the firelight showed only trees. The Pine Ridge lookout sits just shy of 4,000 feet, a squat wooden tower on the edge of a narrow ridge, where the land falls away into miles of forest. It hasn't been staffed in decades. Locals say rangers used to stay there during fire season, watching for smoke plumes in the valleys. Now it's a waypoint for hikers, a place you can climb the creaking stairs and see the mountains fold like waves all the way into Virginia. 2 summers ago, my friend Mark convinced me to camp there for a weekend. He was the sort of guy who thought abandoned places were cool. I wasn't so sure, but the thought of sleeping in a tower above the trees had a strange appeal, so I agreed. We packed light, sleeping bags, small stove, headlamps, a deck of cards, no tents. The tower itself would be our shelter. The hike up was steep but manageable. Pines and hemlocks closed in on either side of the trail, their needles softening every step. By late afternoon, the ridge opened up. The lookout stood against the sky, weathered wood silvered by sun and storms, windows dark and empty like watching eyes. We dropped our packs and climbed the narrow stairs, boards groaning underfoot. Inside, it smelled of old dust and pine resin. The shutters rattled in the wind. The floorboards had graffiti carved into them. Initials, dates, the usual declarations of love and boredom. We spread our bags near the center and opened the windows for air. From up there, the forest didn't look endless. It looked alive. That evening, we cooked noodles on the small stove and watched the sun drop behind the ridges. Shadows stretched long, filling the valleys until the trees below merged into a black sea. A thin fog began to creep up from the hollows. We lit a lantern, its glow painting the wood in soft amber. We played cards, told stories, laughed louder than we needed to. The air cooled quickly, and by the time we zipped ourselves into our bags, the world below had vanished in mist. That was when I heard it. Hey, I thought it was Mark. I rolled onto my side, but he was already asleep, mouth open, snoring faintly. The word hadn't come from him. It had come from outside. I held my breath. The wind moved through the pines, a long sigh. Then again, hey, closer. I sat up, heart pounding. The voice was clear. Male. Calm. Not a shout, not a whisper, but close enough it should have been visible in the glow of the lantern. I crossed to the window and shone my headlamp into the trees. The beam cut fog and branches. Nothing. I told myself it was a trick of the wind. Sound carries strangely on ridges. I lay back down, pulling the bag tight around me, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. Sleep never came. The next morning, Mark teased me about looking like hell. I didn't tell him why. We made coffee, ate granola, and climbed down to explore. The fog had burned off, leaving a sharp blue sky. We hiked to a spur ridge, took photos of a hawk gliding the thermals. By afternoon, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. That night, the fog returned. Thick, heavy. It clung to the tower like breath on glass. We sat by the lantern. The two of us playing cards when it came again. Come here, the voice, clearer than before. Right outside the shutter, Mark froze, card half raised. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. My mouth was too dry to answer. The words came again, patient, calm. "Come here." Mark bolted upright, grabbing the flashlight. He swung it through the windows, beam-slicing fog. Nothing but trees. We stood there, every nerve screaming. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the base of the tower. Boards creaked faintly below, like weight shifting against the supports. I wanted to shout, "Who's there?" but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I pressed my back to the wall, listening to the rhythm. Step, pause, step. They made a full circle, then stopped directly below us. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the voice, right under the floorboards, clear as if spoken into my ear, "Come down." We didn't move the rest of the night. When dawn finally burned the fog away, we forced ourselves to climb down. My legs trembled on the stairs. The ground was damp, soil soft from dew. That's when we saw them. Footprints, large, bare, pressed deep into the mud circling the tower. Not boots, not shoes, bare feet. They looped once, twice, then trailed into the trees. After 20 feet they ended, just stopped, as if the figure had lifted into the fog. We left that morning, packed without speaking, hiked fast, barely stopping for water. At the trailhead, I signed the register again, my handwriting jagged. Mark stood beside me, silent. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, though he hadn't smoked in years. 2 summers later, I still dream of that voice. Calm, patient, male, not angry, not demanding, just certain. And when I wake in my apartment, sirens humming outside, I sometimes hear it again in the radiator hiss, in the wind between buildings. Come here. The Pine Ridge Lookout taught me something. I can't forget. Sometimes it isn't what you see in the woods that destroys your sense of safety. It's what you hear when no one should be speaking at all. But not all Appalachian terrors wait in towers or cabins. Some find you when you're stranded, alone, with nowhere to go but the dark road ahead. I was alone on Cold Branch Road the night my car ran out of gas. By morning, the police asked me the same question I've been asking myself ever since. Why didn't I just drive faster? It was late November, 4 years ago. The kind of night when the cold doesn't just touch your skin, it slides into your bones. I had stayed late at work, later than I should have, and by the time I turned off the highway toward the shortcut home, the sun had long disappeared. Cold Branch Road wasn't much of a road at all, just a narrow strip of patched asphalt winding through the foothills. My dad used to warn me about it. People break down out there and never like the stories they tell when they make it back. The fuel light blinked on 10 minutes into the drive. That soft amber glow on the dash felt like a death sentence out here. I cursed under my breath, easing off the accelerator, praying the gauge was exaggerating. The woods pressed close on either side, skeletal trees clawing against a starless sky. I passed no houses. No other cars, just the endless tunnel of my headlights carving into blackness. When the engine sputtered, it didn't surprise me. I coasted as far as the car would allow before it gave its final cough and died. The world snapped into silence. I rolled into a gravel pullout, a wide patch just large enough to hold the car, and killed the headlights. Darkness collapsed around me. I sat there listening to the tick of cooling metal. My breath fogged the windshield. There was no signal on my phone, not even a flicker. I told myself I'd wait until morning. Someone would pass by. Maybe a farmer hauling feed, maybe a hunter headed out early. Morning would fix it. I reclined the seat, pulled my jacket over my chest, and tried to rest. It couldn't have been long before I woke again. My body knew before my mind did. Something was wrong. The dash clock glowed 12:14. Then I heard it. Footsteps, crunch, shuffle, crunch, deliberate, human, moving along the road. My chest tightened. I sat upright, holding my breath. The steps grew louder, closer, steady against gravel. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They were walking like they had all the time in the world. The footsteps reached the mouth of the pullout, then stopped. Silence. The hair on my arms prickled. I stared forward, refusing to turn my head, afraid that if I looked, I'd see someone standing in the edge of the beams. The car felt paper-thin, its doors nothing but cardboard. Then came more steps, slow, deliberate, turning into the pullout. My throat locked. The crunch of gravel moved closer, closer, until they stopped beside the driver's door. The handle rattled, once, twice. A long pull that made the whole door shudder. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth, an old trick to keep myself from gasping. My lungs ached with shallow, careful breaths. The handle clattered again, harder this time. Then silence, seconds dragged like hours. Then came the soft scrape of movement toward the rear of the car. My pulse thundered in my ears, knuckles tapped the glass. 3 times, light, almost polite. I nearly screamed. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My keys jingled faintly in the column. A sound so small it felt like a gunshot. The steps moved again, circling to the passenger side, then back toward the road. Crunch, shuffle, crunch. Each one quieter. Until there was nothing. I sat frozen, waiting, my muscles locked so tight they ached. Minutes ticked into hours. Every sound inside the car, metal contracting, upholstery popping, made me flinch. The dashboard clock crawled forward, but time had no meaning. Every moment, I waited for the handle to rattle again, for knuckles to tap the glass. Somehow dawn came. Pale light leaked into the trees, and with it the courage to move. I turned the key, half expecting nothing. The engine roared to life. Relief washed over me so hard I nearly sobbed. But when I glanced at the window, my blood turned to ice. A muddy handprint smeared across the driver's side glass. Large, broad, fresh. I stumbled out, boots crunching in frost. The ground was marked with footprints. Heavy, human, pressed deep into gravel. They led from the road, circled the car, lingered at the driver's door, then trailed off into the woods. I followed with my eyes. 20 feet, 30, then they ended. No broken branches, no trail of mud. Just the last print pressed into the earth and then nothing. I slammed back into the car, locked the doors, and drove until the gauge screamed empty. By some miracle, I coasted into a gas station just as the engine died again. The attendant asked if I was okay. I must have looked pale because he stopped pumping mid-fill. All I could manage was, I ran out of gas. But that wasn't true. Not really. The police report listed as unknown individual on roadway. They told me hikers sometimes wander, or drifters pass through. They said no crime had been committed, but none of that explains the handprint. None of it explains how footsteps stop cold in the middle of the woods. Even now, I can still hear them. Crunch, shuffle, crunch. Every time I drive a back road at night, I glance in the mirror, expecting to see someone walking just behind the car, keeping pace, waiting for me to stop. Cold Branch Road taught me that the worst horrors don't always rush at you. Sometimes they take their time, walking slow, circling, waiting for you to realize how thin the glass really is between you and whatever's outside. The mountains fall silent again, but you and I both know that silence doesn't mean safety. Out there, in the cabins, on the trails, in the fog, and on the roads, stories like these keep repeating, whether we hear them or not. If these tales unsettled you, make sure to subscribe to Eerie Echoes. It helps more than you know, and it ensures you'll never face the darkness alone. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, in the Appalachians, it's not always what you see that should terrify you. It's what you can't explain.